The convenience industry has a new store count, 151,975 convenience stores in the United States as of year-end 2025. We'll talk about what that number means and what you can do with it in your operations, whether it's in advocacy or learning more about the industry. So as I mentioned, the store count is at 151,000. Where does that stand? What does that mean? How does that compare to other industries? Where are we going? I'm going to answer some of those questions. And this week, there is no guest. It's just me. I figured, we're going to get a little mathy here. So 2 people with math is way overload for a podcast. So I'll try to keep it high level. I don't want people driving off the road trying to write down numbers or things like that. So I'll keep it high level on the numbers and tell you why they matter. Now, first off, real quick on the store count. This is today when we have this podcast. We're also launching the numbers in the NACS Daily. We also have the February issue of NACS Magazine, goes into more details on the numbers. So we're combining everything in one to give you 3 different ways to look at the numbers and learn about the numbers. Now, these numbers are collected every year with NIQ, which is formerly known as Nielsen, and they have a TD Links entity that looks at store count. And these are not estimates. These are not people just sending in like this is, I think, how many. There are GPS locations for each of these stores, and they do that by looking at representative market basket and some other things. So there's different categories that we have, but true convenience stores, you have to have robust sales inside the store and be convenient in how we define it, which is extended hours operation, convenient location, etc. So a little bit of background. Now let's talk about the numbers. The store count this year for the convenience store industry dropped a little. It was down about 200 and some stores, roughly a 0.2% decrease. Now, last year, there was also a decrease. So that's 2 straight years of decreases. Last year's decrease was also 100 or so stores. But when you look at the overall health of retail, I think the expression is flat is the new up. And that certainly holds true for our industry. Now, one of the numbers we look at is we also look at other channels. And if you look at some competing channels, now this is, when you talk about advocacy, this is a number that always sticks when I talk to reporters or other people about the size of our industry. 151,000, how does that make sense to people? It's a big number. It's not a billion, but it's a big number. 151,000 is essentially equal to adding up every grocery store in the country, plus every dollar store in the country, plus every drugstore in the country, getting close, plus every McDonald's, plus every Starbucks. That's the equivalent of the size of our industry. And I think that's good context when you're talking to people. That shows the scope of our industry, why we matter to communities, and where our relative health is, because we are seeing small format growing. Some of these other channels, particularly grocery, continues to shrink, while we are down a couple hundred over a 2-year period. So another thing that we like to do when we talk about the numbers is 151,000, again, difficult to wrap your head around. There are about 343 million people in the United States. So there's a convenience store per every 2,250 people, roughly. So when you think about that, if a community grows by about 2,500 people, probably due for a convenience store. I think it also shows that that's where, when you look at population growth in areas, states that have seen growth, and I'll get into that in a little bit, it's usually related to population. It's not related to anything other than that. There's more people, more needs for convenience. Makeup of the stores. Now, when we talk about advocacy, one of the key figures we always talk about is convenience stores are small businesses. Now, small businesses literally in terms of their size, but also in terms of who owns them. And year after year, when you look at the size of the companies that own the stores, they are dominated by smaller operators. In this case, I'll define them as our A size operators, which are 10 stores or less. Convenience store companies that have 10 stores or less are 63% of the industry. Now, contrast that to the upper end, which is companies that have 500 or more stores. That is 22% of our industry. Now, that differs in other countries. In Canada, it tends to be much more dominated by the larger companies. So, looking at the smaller operators, look at it as the strength of advocacy, the strength of telling stories about small business success, the strength about as many businesses as we have. So thinking of that, we have the next day on the Hill in March. It's a chance to come to DC and tell your story to your elected leaders. We make it easy. End of that pitch, go to convenience.org, learn more. It's a great opportunity to learn more about advocacy, and people that do it for the first time say, what took me so long? Okay. I want to talk about a couple states. Number one, the state with the most convenience stores is Texas. Now, Texas is not the largest state in the union by either area or by population. It was the first state to have a convenience store 99 years ago. 1927 was the first convenience store, and it was in Dallas, Texas, which eventually became 7-Eleven. That's another story for another day. But 1 out of 10 stories is in Texas because Texas fits the two things I just mentioned: large population, large area, and a need for convenience. So that's why Texas is number one. California, the largest state in the country, is number two. Why is California not number one? It's really hard to do business in California, whether it's selling fuel or selling food or selling whatever. It's not the easiest place. It's also expensive for real estate. So that's one of the reasons that California is not number one in terms of store count. Texas is. I'm not going to bore you with the top 10. You'll see that in the next daily. You'll see that next magazine. We'll have a lot more on that. Now, another thing about the states is there are 22 states that gained stores, even though there was a slight decline. There were 3 that stayed the same and 25 went down. Now, the 3 states that went down the most, I want to talk about those for a second. Number 1 on the list was New York State. And a large reason for that is while the rest of the country has been growing population, on average, New York is losing population. So, as I said earlier, you lose population, you lose attractiveness for convenience stores, maybe there's not enough customers, etc. It's also a difficult climate with some of the regulations that we see, whether it's in New York City or further upstate. Second, in terms of losing stores, is Massachusetts. And if you want to talk about regulations, there are a bunch of regulations in that state that relate to nicotine, that relate to the ability to sell fuels, etc. So as it becomes tougher to do business, I think stores make decisions and they say, do I want to stay here? And if you're an advocate in Massachusetts and you think it's a really good idea that there are fewer convenience stores in your state, remember what I said earlier: small businesses, and that's jobs, and that's not good for the state. Number 3 on the list in terms of losing stores is New Jersey. Factor in that is, of course, that they are the state that mandates full-serve gas, which makes it a little bit more difficult to be in operations and sell fuel, particularly 24 hours. Finally, I want to wrap up before I talk about fuels and the fuels count, want to give a historical comparison to what the store count means. The peak for our store count was the year 2018, 8 years ago, and there was 154,000 stores. So there are, over the last 8 years, the store count has declined by 1.9%, less than 2%. So when you look at the last 8 years, and we've heard these phrases: retail apocalypse, the challenge of online, all of these M&A activity that has led to consolidation in our industry, and oh, by the way, COVID, all of those factors over the last 8 years, and the decline from the peak is less than 2%. So that shows, I think, where we are in terms of how customers appreciate convenience and what our future looks like. Also, a couple other historical notes. First time we hit 100,000 stores was 30 years ago, 1998. We hit 101,000 stores. And if you're a real history nerd, 50 years ago, 1976, our bicentennial, we had 35,000 stores. So in 50 years, we've gone from 35,000 stores as an industry to 152,000 essentially. I said I was going to talk about fuel, and that's the other part of talking about the numbers and what they all mean. While the overall store count declined, like I said, by a couple hundred stores, 0.2%, the number of convenience stores that sell fuel increased by 0.6%. Now, I think a lot of people out of the industry would say, that doesn't make any sense. I thought we're turning over to an electric vehicle culture. Yes, we will. But obviously, that future is taking more time than I think people had thought. There are still, the average fuel consumption in this country is going up, according to the U.S. Department of Energy, roughly 30 miles traveled per day. So we're seeing a slight decrease in the amount of fuel purchased. In the peak year 2017, it was 9.3 million barrels per day, 42 gallons in a barrel. Do the math there. I'm not going to do math here on the air. EIA is projecting 8.9, so a 0.4 million barrel decrease out of 9. So it's not a significant decrease. So there's plenty of runway for fueling. And what we've seen over the last few years is fueling has been very supportive of the overall offer at the stores. The profits help support some tight margins inside the store and make the overall operation profitable when there can be some headwinds with competition and some other things related to expenses. Convenience stores sell about 80% of the gas in the country. And also, coincidentally, it's slightly different number. 80.7% of convenience stores sell fuel. So that's a look at the fueling. We are updating all of these fueling numbers in our Fuels Resource Center. This is the time of the year, early February, is when we update all these numbers. And all those numbers I cited, whether it's Department of Transportation, Department of Energy, all these others, we update them. And I want to mention one other set of numbers before we end this episode. When we talk about the number of fueling locations in the country, there's really not a one site fits all. Here are the number of stores that sell fuel in the country. But what we've done is, best as anybody, piece together the number of fueling outlets in the country. And we put it at about 150,000. Now, as I said, we know there's about 122,000 convenience stores that sell fuel. There's also about 12,000 kiosks that sell fuel. And those are not classified as convenience stores by NIQ, the ones that do the convenience store count. They are those kiosks that are really small and maybe one person, two customers can fit in at a time. After that, it's uncomfortable. So those really, really tiny kiosks, if you're old, and I said photomat size booth, you get what I'm saying, a little bigger than that. So there's about 12,000 kiosks. And then there's another, we have the alphabet soup. There's another one there. I mentioned EAI, which is the government. There's EAE. There's Energy Analysts International, which is now abbreviated their name. They do a hypermarket count that looks at the total number of hypermarkets. And hypermarkets are the club stores, the Walmarts, BJ's, Kroger's, etc., grocery stores that sell fuel. And they put the number, they're updating it right now, but they put the number at roughly 7,000. So you have 122,000 convenience stores that sell fuel, 12,000 kiosks, that takes you to 134. You have 7,000 more that are hypermarkets. You're at about 141. How do you get to 150? The rest, as best as we can determine, are low volume service stations, first off. Service stations that do nothing but sell fuel and maybe auto repairs. Then there's those low volume outlets that may only have a couple pumps, and then other places like marinas that also get counted into that pump list. So that's how we get to about 150,000 stores. We'll have more information on that, as I said, in the Fuels Resource Center. A lot of things in there that can help with advocacy. Talk about gas prices, because spring is the time where we undergo this transition to summer blend fuel. So more to come on that. Look for more in NACS Daily and NACS Magazine. We're updating those resources right now. So finally, want to mention that these numbers that we use, the store count, the count by state, and all these others are super important to NACS in how do we build out advocacy? How do we talk to, whether it's reporters or political leaders, about what's going on in their state, their district, their country? And they're also the backbone for our state of the industry resources. We are announcing the 2015 trends analysis, all that stuff related to the industry's health at the NACS State of the Industry Summit. That'll be April 14th to 16th in Schaumburg, Illinois. If you don't know where that is, it's basically Chicago. So another commercial, but go to convenience.org if you're interested in that. It is the best event to go for roughly a day and a half and learn everything about the trends and analysis about the industry and the numbers and what's going on and what the future may hold, which also will end with a tagline to this episode. So thanks for listening today. We have much more on the numbers coming up, as I said, in NACS Daily, in NACS Magazine, in the Fuels Resource Center. Thanks for listening. Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.